and I'm just trying to catch my breath. I'm ready to go in a minute. I have the agenda on my screen, which I'll share, and I have the minutes, which are draft minutes until the board reviews them and provides a vote so that I can put them onto the website. And that's our business right off the bat.
We're live on YouTube, and we are
Thank you,
about
Cliff.
20 seconds.
That's the voice of Cliff, everyone. He's a computer genius.
Send him to
When
my
I say computer genius, he knows how to unplug the computer, wait 10 seconds, and then plug it back in. And he fixes it every single time. Yeah, he does a little more than that, right, Danielle?
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm laughing behind the muted mic.
Jerry, if we still have a half minute, someday I'd like somebody to explain to me the symbolism of the images on the town's town shield, the town emblem.
I can't do that. I have no idea. I would be asking somebody like you who's been here for a little while. I don't know.
Yeah, but it all melds together over the last year.
Yeah. Either Augie or Dan would know. What
Dan would know.
symbol- Dan would know.
I vote Dan. Dan's
I vote Dan too.
Because it's two holding hands.
Theodora, I got to get an invitation to Theodora. She can't find her invitation. Hold on a second.
I see her on, I think, on the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's showing up, but
Where's Sally's invite?
Isn't that the bridge on the Boston Post Road? In the seal?
We would think so, but I don't know.
Oh,
Yes, that's supposed to be. It's supposed to be the town of Mamaroneck shaking hands with the town of Rye on that bridge to unite the two separate parts of the village, because they had to have an election in both parts to become a village. That's what that's exactly what it is, Jarrett.
there you go.
Thank you very much.
just solve the mystery.
We're going to be redoing that. Well, the state's redoing that bridge, so we're going to have a new seal mayor. It's going to be updated. It's going to be glass, steel and glass.
When is that? When
I
is
don't think that'll work well on a seal.
How long have you known that explanation, Tom?
when is that meant to
2021.
happen? That's going to take a while, isn't it?
Yeah.
2021 for 6 months,
6 months.
more or less. Okay, Mayor, I'm putting up the minutes. We got to call the meeting to order, all that kind of good stuff.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, you put up the minutes?
So we'll call the meeting to order at 5:17. The minutes, the draft minutes that I put together are on the screen, I hope.
Yes, they are.
I would just need any corrections or additions or anything that is off. If not, we can ask for an approval, and then we'll move forward to the agenda.
Does everybody have a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Does someone want to make a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll accept the minutes.
Need a second?
Second.
All in favor of accepting the minutes?
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it.
Thank you.
Who was missing? Mr. Sposino should be here in a little while.
Theodora, get on? Oh, hey, I see her.
Yeah,
Okay.
she's there.
I'm here.
Looks happy.
They didn't read the minutes.
Okay. Gary, you want to go to item number 2?
So item number 2 is a board member, a committee member had sent them to me, and they were excellent questions. This was something I think as a follow-up, because they might have been posted sometime earlier this month as a follow-up to the larger document that the state put out. And it's called questions and insights for boards and committees like ours here to consider. So hold on, I got Bob emailing. Can you send me the link? Yeah, I'll send Bob the link in a second. So I'm going to put them up, and it's really up to the what they want to do as far as either working through those questions or using them as a reference, as a guide. It's pretty much an open discussion. So let me take this one off and let me pull up those.
Was that basically a summary from the governor's big report, the
I don't know,
154-page report?
It might have been a little more than that, but let's see where I.
It was from I think it was the toolkit that had, or it was one of them that had the conclusions and just listed those questions. And
At the end, I think that's at the end of the governor's report, right? That's where we have to come to the conclusions.
it's useful.
I'm putting it up now.
And somewhere I have a PDF. I'll have to look for it. Human
Are you
rights.
putting it up?
Yeah, I'm putting it up. I just got to find it. I'm going to go to the website. I think we posted it on the website. So I'll find it there. Another second. It's over here. Okay. This is it. All right, so the first main question is, I guess, asking what function should the police perform? I'm not sure if that's much of a question, but I'll leave it up to the committee. I got to take care of Spalzino, Mayor. So if you want to lead
Okay.
the discussion, I got to get him a link.
I sent it to him.
Okay, thanks. Cliff.
Well, these are, obviously questions that are going to lend themselves to more than a 2-minute answer here. Maybe this,
I'll bring him back up. Sorry about that. Okay.
okay. This might be, where we talk about breaking down into smaller groups
Mm.
and working on this. Because this has to do also, how we form policies and procedures, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Plus number 2 is about what the board would want to discuss. I mean, what the committee would want to discuss on staffing, budgeting, equipping the police with, certain items like body cameras, or, I don't know if we have a lot of military type equipment. I'm not sure. So I would have to defer.
Still have a SWAT van?
Hmm?
Do we still have a SWAT van?
We have
No,
a
I don't
van.
believe we do. Chief, we no longer have the SWAT program, right?
No, we don't.
We rely on the county for that.
There are various departments throughout the county have teams.
So that would be on them. Should components of the police department be civilianized? That's definitely a discussion question.
Well, I mean, I'd leave this open to the board. How would you like to handle these issues? Would you like to break out in groups? Would you like to, and have subsections try and deal with this and come back to the larger group?
I
Can you
think
scroll to the bottom real quick? Sorry.
I think if we did that, we'd just have to discuss it all over again with the bigger group. It would make sense to try and tackle it all together. But I did read in the police, in the governor's report, that one size doesn't fit all, right? So maybe if we looked at what's working in our town and figure out what areas that we wanted to improve on
Okay,
in
let's just
some of these
start.
situations, I think it would make it easier because there's a lot here.
There's a heck of a lot,
Huge
Yeah.
amount there.
and they are weighty issues.
How would we assess what's working? It's pretty subjective. So, no, maybe not subjective, but statistics. I know the police have some statistics they can provide us, but Scott, what do you think? Like, how would you answer? How do we want to discuss what's working in our community? I can tell you how many parking tickets they give out, but that's about it. That's the extent of it for me.
Right. I don't know either.
Yeah.
I'm not in the loop on all of it, but
I mean, they did provide the 2018, 2019 stats
Yeah,
on
stats.
crime here.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I guess we can look over that, but that really doesn't tell you what you're really missing. It just tells
Maybe we
you-
also start by asking the police what they think is working, and obviously we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just.
That doesn't mean that that's the definitive answer, but at least, that's where you start.
Are we supposed to be re-examining the entire organization of the police and their functions, which in many ways are technical questions about which we have very little expertise?
Yeah.
Right.
The motivation behind this was the Black Lives Matter and all the questions it raised about biases in law enforcement and whether or not they exist in our community and how they are handled. Maybe we should go through this and pick out 3 or 4 that we think are the most important related to those questions, and then focus our discussion around those. Other things will come into it, but we can narrow it down to what's most important for the moment and most important for the mission of this committee.
Would it also be possible to get some wider, I know that this is open to the public at the moment, we're going to have some more public engagement, but, seek out some input from the larger community just for people to email, obviously some of the emails are going to be interesting, I'm sure, but, just to seek out some input, just to see what people think are positives and negatives of our local police department, just to,
So Lauren, on the 1st and on the 10th, Cliff and I, or Cliff and and another staff member will be running the public forum, and people will be able to attend the Zoom and provide us with, whatever comment, whatever discussion point they want to provide us. At that point, by that time, I will ask Cliff to provide a catch-all email, like PRRC comments at vomni.org, and then it'll just catch that, and I can just share everything that I'll get copied on it, and I'll just share everything with the committee so that they have that information if they want to. So
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
One of the prime goals of the governor's executive order was to review the policy and practices, right? We have received the policies from the police department. Using the criteria that Mr. Gitlitz expressed, to look for implicit or overt bias, or obviously excessive force, things that are of that nature that have been prevalent in causing tension between the community and police departments across the nation. Shouldn't we look at the policies and practices that we have to see if they either discourage those negative aspects, or don't deal with them? And if they don't deal with them, we should be trying to formulate ways that make them more responsive to those goals. And I'm just throwing it out there for you folks to consider.
Well, I would
Uh,
add that we have both William Bratton's report on our police department, and we also have Judge Colleen McMahon's legal analysis and critique of the behavior of our police and at the direction of the board in chief at the time. And we have not repaired and taken the actions from accreditation on down the line that were suggested by both the former police commissioner and her honor. And maybe that would be a good place to start, is how we can bring our police department in conformity with the norms that exist statewide at this time.
Okay, how do we figure out how they are out of conformity?
Mayor, if I could just say something?
Yes.
So,
Yes, I can't see.
Jerry, could you stop screen sharing?
Oh,
Please.
sure. Yep. No problem.
Thanks.
so did everyone get a copy of the document, the follow-up from Police Reform and Reinvention Committee meeting from 11/19?
No. Chief, I didn't hand that out yet because I was out doing stuff with the Parks Department and handing out those masks today at the food pantry. That's the stuff you sent this morning?
It is.
Yeah,
So-
so I didn't get that to the board, to the committee yet.
Not a problem. So I'm not going to go through it bullet by bullet, but I'll explain what's in here so that it can be reviewed maybe for the next meeting. So basically what I did was I went through the entire Police Reform Reinvention Collaborative book, and I went through it and I indicated everything that the police department is already doing or has already done, and some things that we are currently in the process of. So I think that would clear up a lot about what we're conforming with as part of this collaborative already. So that might be a good starting point when everyone gets a copy of that to kind of take a look through. I like the idea of what the mayor said about maybe looking at the certain policies that have to do with, for example, we put use of force on there already, the complaint process. What I can do for now is go through all the policies that I think might be most applicable to what this reform is about and put those up for everyone to kind of take a look at, see how we can improve it, make it better, any suggestions, things like that.
I think that's a good starting point.
Well, one thing about such policies is I'm enough of a sociologist to know that what are written in policies don't always capture what actually happens on the ground. And at some point, we'll have to look at what people believe is happening on the ground.
Right, I think that's the point where we get public input.
Well, I'm going to add two comments on this that I think are relevant. One is that Theo just mentioned the decision from the lawsuit 10 years ago. And I know we have moved on distant from there, but Judge McMahon cited a number of specific processes and problems in that. Maybe we should distribute that to those who want to take a look at it in as a baseline of where we were at some point. The other thing is—
It's a very long decision. If you would be comfortable, I would be willing to go through the decision and just make a list of things that she suggests, and then you can all decide whether they're worth discussing or not discussing, or whether they're moot at this point.
Well, I
But
think—
you can't
I'd
make
like to
everyone-
review. I'd like to read the decision personally. But
I have it there. Most of us have it. Or find it's John Doe versus Village of Mamaroneck.
okay,
Very long. It's very long.
It's 60 pages, and not everybody's going to want to read that. I enjoyed reading it at the time for reasons that some of you will know.
Can I just point out something in that decision? Judge McMahon specifically calls me credible. I got that for the rest of my life. A federal judge has called me credible.
on record.
On
Grasshopper.
record, yes.
Which of course only proves that federal judges make mistakes too. But
All the time.
but the other thing
That was a
I
great setup.
like the idea of the public forums.
But that's part of the process.
We really need the voice of the minority communities. And I don't know whether they will feel comfortable talking up at the public forums. So
Can I make a suggestion with that?
Yes.
We spoke about possibly doing a survey and maybe to capture all different members of the community. We can get the Community Resource Center to maybe help with that. There are going to be anonymous surveys, so maybe that could be a starting point.
Sandra, actually, you've been in a number of our community meetings, and you've
Yes.
played a wonderful constructive role at the community meetings. But those problems have come up with them, and the lack of confidence has come up at the meetings. Anyway, I will be happy to send Jerry a copy of the decision if people are interested in it. And maybe,
I would, yeah, I think if
Theo
Ms.
can
wants to-
redline or bold or the points and recommendations for those who just want to skim it quickly.
Okay, that would be helpful. I think there's a few people who would like to read it. I think it would be, but bear in mind, it is a decision, I believe, from 2007.
2007. Well, that's 13 years ago.
Yeah, 13 years ago.
Yeah, I would like to suggest that the survey, Jerry, is also written in Spanish because of the population in Spanish, and so that the people who live in the village and who don't speak English that fluent can participate also.
Okay.
Janet, let me ask you, what would be the best way to try and elicit participation from folks to let them know that, that there'll be no repercussions, that we really do want to have their input?
I think a survey is a good way to start. Tom and Chief Leahy, we have had meetings with the community, and even at those, closed door meetings, the community still doesn't feel safe. And it's what their feedback is, right? I wish, and I will do my best to communicate one of the things that we heard from the community. And I'm glad that we are sort of going back to 2006, because I myself participated in the lawsuit. I, witnessed certain things. And then, I'm gonna bring also some of that, to this conversation. But I think that a survey, an anonymous survey, it's, a good way to start, because public hearings, we all know that our community doesn't feel comfortable, voicing, especially issues with their police department or their local government, So I think that I support the idea of a survey. Thank you, Lieutenant.
I'll get on it right away. I'll have one.
And Tom, in answer to your question, the Community Resource Center is a good source. Other non-for-profit organizations are a good source to distribute that kind of communication. And we have a Hispanic newspaper that could publish, could interview you or anybody of the members of the board and let the community know that they will be safe and they are anonymous and they can come forward without any repercussions.
And also, that paper is Hispanico, is that the one?
The Westchester Hispano.
Just it.
Yeah, it's a newspaper. Can I make another suggestion? Sure. This is not something that's done where I live, but I've noticed with the village, those mass phone calls from Jerry that's in English and Spanish, just letting the community know that certain things are coming up, because we should make this as important as the census. As we were preparing for the census, and I'm saying we, meaning the village, there was one of the things that I heard about when I was in the office, and this has been a running theme, that there's not enough notice about things that are coming up. There's not enough time to prepare. So if Jerry or whoever is designated to do that, I don't know if it's this Swift Reach 911, where that communication is broadcasted, just kind of a build up to a particular date, and it's also translated in Spanish. I think that might also help with just a little bit of a comfort, even just saying where people can go if they should have questions, because even though we kind of put it out there, there might be still other questions that people might have, that reassurance, and they probably will go to those other resources that they feel comfortable. So if everyone's on the same page that way, I think that's key.
Would it be, and I mean, I know Jerry speaks Spanish fluently, but Jerry's also the village manager, right? So would it be useful if perhaps Jerry could read the English version and Janet, somebody who's known to the community and trusted in the community, could then read the Spanish version in the same phone call? So that I think, because what I want the message I want to get across is that we're not working at cross purposes. We're all working together to come to this outcome, to try and engender as much trust as we can going forward. So to have, I mean, Janet, if you'd feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, of course.
And this is specifically regarding informing people about a survey.
Yes.
And encouraging them to take a survey.
Yes.
Correct.
Should we not do the same for the public forums?
I'm sorry, what?
Should we not advertise the public forums in the same way to really?
Yeah, we could do it all in the same phone call.
Yep, the public forum dates for this month, John, are already set, so we could easily do that. Yeah, yeah.
So maybe we can get it out
Quick.
ASAP. And
But
then just blast it out a couple of times.
But it might also be useful, I know this just makes the task much greater, to have public forums for specific publics. So we have a public forum which Janet or Gerandi or someone who speaks Spanish moderates, to which we invite specifically the Spanish-speaking public. We have a public forum, I've forgotten the name of the preacher who spoke last, the pastor who spoke is on the community.
Reverend Taylor.
Someone who has the confidence of that community, because maybe by bringing them into an event which they will feel they own, they will feel more comfortable expressing their feelings, even if their feelings are stereotypes.
I don't know if I really like the idea of kind of segregating this and having one for Hispanics and one for African Americans, then one for whites. I mean, it kind of goes against what we're trying to do here too. We're trying to look at this as a community. And I want the Hispanic members of the community to feel like they're part of the community. And I want the African American in the community to feel that they're part of the community, just like, I feel like I'm part of the community. I understand your feeling about when we could have bilingual there, but I don't know. I understand trying to reach a segment of the community. I really do. But then I also don't want to like have it be like you're apart. You know what I mean?
Well, then you're also canceling out cross dialogue that way, which I think is hugely important to have that cross dialogue between.
And I think it's important for people of different experiences to hear the other person's experience.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with Tom. I'm sorry. I agree with Tom in the sense that, everybody has, and we can have people there translating or just speaking whatever they want to say in Spanish. We did that with the Black Lives Matter forum that we had. We had many people who spoke in Spanish and they expressed their feelings and their opinions, and we can do the same. I agree with Tom that we should not segregate different communities or different groups.
Jarrett, what do you think?
I think you're right. I think you're both right. One of the ways I was thinking that you can get the word out is maybe through food pantry, because you got a lot of different people, different backgrounds hitting the food pantry in these days. I don't know how the churches feel about doing that, letting people know, but between the emails, the posting it on the website, the food pantry, I think you're going to get a wide variety of people. But
maybe we can have some flyers that have the, the information for a website they can go to, or for the link for the survey or something. So that way, even if people don't feel comfortable approaching someone or asking, they can take a.
So for 3 hours.
I am sure that the folks who run the food pantry would allow us to do that.
So for 3 hours today, I ran a table giving out masks and hand sanitizer today at the food pantry. And I set myself up right at the entrance, and I cut it short to come here for this meeting. But I can easily make up those flyers and give them out at that food pantry, because we anticipate giving out more masks, because we gave out 4,000 masks today and 800 bottles of hand sanitizer.
Wow.
So we're going to try to do that again next week on the 1st, which is our first public forum. I'll have flyers and just hand out flyers. It'll be, one side English, one side Spanish, and with the Zoom link. That's it. That's perfect. I can do that next Tuesday, actually.
And just have it say interpretation available or whatever.
Yeah, we'll have right Spanish speak, right? Yeah.
I'm gonna kind of step out beyond this, which is a very large scale operation in order to elicit some statistics. I'm not sure what the substance of which will be. But whether it will be, are you happy with your police department, or are you unhappy with your police department? And then we get a, yes, no ratio. I'm not exactly sure how specific our questions are going to be, and whether anything that we find out from these statistics is actually going to inform our discussion and the kinds of changes and reforms that will end up being implemented, whether they are already in the works or whether they have to, start anew. But the limb part comes now. Maybe if we're talking about communities who are not necessarily comfortable coming forward in every forum and may not be comfortable coming forward where there are police in an obvious way present, if they feel that they have in fact been singled out by law enforcement or government institutions for discrimination or other behavior, people may not be willing to come forward. But maybe we could do some smaller in-community forum inquiring whether people have in fact experienced discrimination at the hands of the police, and have it be as blatant as that in the question, because really we can spend a few sessions on all the really good things that the police are doing, but we also know that the police as a whole in this country are killing people. So we need to find out whether people are experiencing discrimination in our village, as we know they have in the past, and we don't have evidence that redress has been made for the behaviors which in fact were manifest in that in those discriminatory behaviors in the past. And I don't know whether they continue or not. I honestly don't. But I do know that some of the compliance requirements have not been met. And based on that, I don't think we have any way of knowing how people are feeling about the Village of Mamaroneck Police Department, and perhaps different forum where people could actually discuss within different communities and in private, not on TV, whether they've had personal experiences which have made them uncomfortable. Might be a more or a different direct way to go about it. I'm gonna give a quick anecdote, and you can all laugh at me, and that would be fine because you're probably right. But I was with my 19-year-old daughter walking my dog in my neighborhood today, and a police car, not somebody who lives in my neighborhood, but someone different, someone I did not know, drove by my daughter and me and my dog, slowed down, and then drove away, and then came back the other way a few minutes later and stopped me and said quite abruptly, "Did you pick it up?" And I said, "I'm sorry." And he said, your dog went to the bathroom. Did you pick it up?" And I said, "Of course, it's right here." And he said, "You walked away. I saw you walking away from it. You walked away." And I said, "I didn't walk away. I would never do that. This is my neighborhood. I would never do that. And here it is." And he's like, "I saw you walking away from it." And I said, "Whatever." And he drove away. And that was it. Normal encounter? Sure. Not neighborly? Frank Moresco lives in my neighborhood. He would never speak to me like that. He would just be like, hey, what can I do? Can I help you out? What's going on? How are you? How's your kid? So this was an officer I wasn't familiar with who spoke to me surprisingly abruptly when we were talking about dog poop, and he was wrong. I never even stepped away from, what would I do? Leave it there with my 19-year-old daughter and all the neighbors in front of a neighbor's house? So am I crazy? Or was there an officer who saw me on TV or who was told that one is a problem? So if you're somebody who's in the village who may feel singled out by police because of how you look or how big your mouth is or things that you think, you may not feel comfortable speaking in public because you, as some of these websites I've seen said, how dare you expect police will come to you when all you talk about is wanting to defund them? Not about me, but someone else was referred to this way. Wait till you try to call the police to come help you when all you talk about is trying to defund them. That was not me, and I would never believe that my police department would not come if my family were in trouble. But the mere suggestion is terrifying, and that we couldn't speak our minds because of the what's the word? Is it revenge, vendetta, whatever? But there are people who would say that what happened to me this afternoon was not unrelated to our committee. So I believe that there are people in our village who may feel that they have not been treated with the utmost respect by every officer.
That's why one of the survey questions or some of the surveys that we've seen do have questions that basically get right to the point, and there's free text that the person can actually share a story with everyone on the survey about what transpired. So definitely having some of those questions would be helpful.
That's awesome. Thank you for your opinion.
The chiefs have shared with me 3 different surveys, 3 different batches of surveys that I can share with the PRRC. And if maybe we can just send, if you can just look at them, send back the top 15 out of these surveys. I think there's 3 or 4 from Jersey, 1 from maybe Illinois, I can't remember, and 1 from New York, from Croton, right? Chief, from Croton, I think it was. Croton on the Hudson.
I think you're right.
And the DOJ, I believe, included one as well.
Okay, so I have those. I can send them to the committee right now. You could take a.
How many are there in total?
There's just different samples. There's like 5 or 6 different samples.
Okay, when you said the top 15, you mean the top 15 questions?
Yes, top 15 questions.
Okay.
If you can send me the top 15 questions, if everyone sends me that top 15, I can come up with, something.
Okay.
And that'll be a group,
So could that be a homework assignment for us to get back to you tomorrow with that?
Yeah, that's your homework. You don't have to get back to me tomorrow, but Friday at least.
Tomorrow night.
I'll pull the family together. I'll pull the family together over dinner on Thursday to work this out.
I can send them, so I don't have to send them. It's up to the committee.
No, I think it'd be. I mean, it's up to the board, obviously, but I think it would be worthwhile to send them. I mean,
okay.
I'm a big owner of not having to reinvent the wheel.
I'll get them to you right now.
If the surveys include information about how the material was collected, how they did the sampling, how they got people to respond to the questions, that would be helpful too. I say that from somebody who's done a couple of surveys. Those questions are sometimes as important as the specific questions you ask.
And the surveys will be confidential, right? I mean, the people are going to be allowed to do it confidentially.
Yes, confidentially. You should be.
I got it, Jerry. That was fast.
So this is so they're pretty similar. I mean, Clayton, Fishkill, and Croton on the Hudson look like they're Likert. This one's a Likert scale, 1 to 5. Fishkill is very simplistic because it's a simple life in Fishkill.
Yeah.
Is there a
There's different
deadline?
samples.
Has the department done anything like this before? Have there ever been any surveys of the community or any kind of feedback that's recently?
I don't believe so, no.
So then it would be maybe even more appropriate to have something like this
Yes.
Certainly.
to gather information. Yeah, everyone has them. Take a look at them. If you want to send them back, and we'll put together a survey. This will give us something. This will give us something that our public information officer can work on, which who's not part of this committee, Robert, but works part-time for us. So that would be good.
Is there a deadline for the surveys to be completed? How are we going to, and how many responses do we expect just to have like a fair sampling?
Yeah, I don't. So that's a tough one as far as the second question. Maybe we can have, if we can get the surveys out by the end of next, if I can get them out by the middle of next week, end of next week, as far as pushing it out there in all sorts of different platforms, maybe 15 days, 2 weeks.
If you get 10% back, that's a good return rate.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
We're not going to get a set of data from which we conclude that 15% of the population believes this, 12% believes that.
No.
But what we will get is a sampling of what people's opinions are.
Yes, you get a snapshot.
It's not even a snapshot, because a snapshot assumes that it is in some ways generalizable to the entire population. We're not going to be able to do that. That would be constructing a universe, picking a random sample. Those kinds of things we can't do. But what we can do as a survey is come and say, these kind of themes keep coming up. These kinds of themes seldom come up. And that's already very useful information.
I think what you'll find is that the people who have the most to say are the ones who are the most likely to respond, right? So the generalized middle who kind of feels maybe indifferent one way or the other, who don't have a specific experience to speak to, are more likely to just kind of ignore and not respond. Usually you'll find it's, the extremes kind of on one way or the other. So you kind of have to take that.
The social scientist in me.
No, I know. I'm just talking in general, right? So, I mean, from my experience, that's been the people who have something to say are the most likely the ones to speak up. So,
And sometimes the most angry.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Jarrett, what do you feel would be the best way to engage the African American community to participate?
I think, like you said, the reason I picked the food pantry because I know a lot of people go there.
Okay.
I met a lot of people today.
Yeah, and it's like that's where between there and the HRC, I think you'll cover a lot of people in this side of Mamaroneck, and some that live in the village, and some that come from Rye Neck. I think the website, I think the robocall, if that's what we go with. I mean, I think you like Lauren said, you're really going to get the people who either are very extremely happy with the police department, or some that have somewhat problems with the police department. The middle ground is just going to say, yeah, I don't have time for this. So it's going to be the vocal, the ones that are really supportive, which is great, and the ones that have problems, which is great. Like John said, it's the things that keep coming up that we have to look for. That's really what we have to look for. I mean, these one-offs, they're bad, but if you get a pattern of the same thing, that's where we really got to focus. So yeah, I think the food pantry probably would be the best way I could think of.
What about the churches?
Well, traditionally Black churches are, I mean, that's what I go to. I've been to Catholic churches, I've been to churches, but Black churches are more social for community news. I think that would be a great place to let people know. I just don't know how many of them are local residences. A lot of Mamaroneck churches we've been going to the churches because our parents went to the churches, and some of us move out of town, but we still come to Mamaroneck for the church. That's your house,
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand. Does anybody else have any other ideas of how to reach out and do members of the community who might not?
I think Elsa mentioned community organizations. You know, we have at least 3 nonprofit organizations in Mamaroneck that we could reach out to distribute the surveys.
What are they, Janet?
One Mamaroneck and Washingtonville Housing Alliance. Those are the 2 that come to mind right now.
Okay. What about Cure?
Yeah, I was going to mention Cure.
Cure also, yes.
Also,
What is
I would suggest that every participant, every member of this committee, we all have our own distribution lists. So we can use that too. I have, a large distribution list that I can send this service to, and I'm sure all of you do it also.
Yeah, we could blast it out on social media also.
Yes.
The websites.
Nextdoor.
Yeah.
Facebook.
Nextdoor is a good source for this community.
Yeah.
It's also very entertaining.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's both.
Janet mentioned one Mamaroneck, Washingtonville, and what was the third?
Cure.
Cure.
C-U-R-E.
One question, Jerry, would the survey be electronic? Would be a paper survey? What kind of, I mean, I know that most people may say, oh, it could be, Google Forms, that kind of thing. But I just want to make sure.
I can have both versions, but people would have to print out the paper, and then they can drop it off. We have a mailbox right out front.
Mm-hmm.
They can drop it off to any building, but we have a drop box, which is a big giant green mailbox.
Right outside 123 Mamaroneck Avenue.
Yeah, right outside 123. So it's pretty easy to do that. And ideally, if we had community organizers maybe go out and collect surveys from people, so we didn't have to have 100 people, 200, 300, God willing, people come fill out the surveys, that they could just collect them from people and then just drop them off here, because they're anonymous, so there's not going to be any names on them, so it doesn't matter.
Can we collect them for them as well?
Yeah, that's what I'd want. That would be fine. And then just drop them off here, because unfortunately I still have to keep the village hall closed. I do have all the equipment set up to open up the front door vestibule, able to do business, but I'm holding off right now because of the spike. But at some point we will have the ability for customers, residents, to be able to come in and interact one-on-one with our offices. So, but we use the mailbox pretty regularly. Everyone does now.
There's another question that we'll have to face, but when we think about designing this survey, some surveys just focus on very short questions like, what's your income? Where do you live? Answer yes or no, something like those are the easiest to fill out and send back and to quantify. But some of the more interesting questions would be to get people to describe interactions they have had with the police, which means they've got to take the time and write them out. Or to list 3 and describe briefly 3 very positive interactions. Have you had any negative actions? Can you describe them? Those will go into more depth and tell us more than short answer things. It's real hard to do that in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, I know. So challenged by that.
The Croton on the Hudson document looks pretty good. I've been looking at it while on the phone. I mean, it's pretty complete.
Others have copied it too, and then I think ADA at Mary just sent out Rybrooks, right? He sent out
I put the link to the Rybrook results there. There's a lot of people who commented and wrote out, little anecdotal stories there. They got a pretty good response there. I think they got around 680 surveys back. And I mean,
really?
That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Rye Brook.
Yeah, they have a lot of homeowner associations in Rye Brook, and they kind of hit those up and had the HOAs blasted to the residents there. And they had the survey out for about 10 to 14 days. And they got those, almost 700 people to fill out the survey. So that's the only thing. And I understand, you want to get as many people as you can and take the paper ones, but I could clearly see this becoming a full-time job if you do get the response that you're looking for somebody to comb through all those paper responses and try to do it. They use that Survey Monkey, and that's how they were able to compile the results so quickly.
Mhm.
And then they had the results available for their listening session last night so that, they put them up, and people also had access to the websites. People could come on the listening session and also talk in regards to any of the survey result questions.
So
Good point.
we could do that, and I'm sure Robert Ingenito, our public information officer, would want something like that. But that would only be a web-based response. I'd want to try to solicit the paper responses and, writing out maybe some as well for the community that doesn't necessarily use those kinds of platforms.
You could maybe have somebody just responsible for, taking the paper ones and putting it electronically in there so that you're able to get the results.
Staff member. I have a part-time assistant that works for me now. He does a lot of the legal stuff, but he works for me now. So, Mayor, I can have Neri start doing that. And
Right.
And she reads and writes Spanish as well. So,
This might also be a project that we could get a couple of kids from the high school to input the data.
I'd have to drop it off. See, Neri's here 3 days a week.
Okay.
In the office 3 days a week.
They also sent the survey to the high schools as well. And so
I
don't
was
know if you
actually going to
wanna-
ask if we could utilize, because I don't know what the rules are around that for the schools, but I know that we have I'm part of Mamaroneck, so Dr. Shop sends out an email pretty regularly to everybody in the school, and it could possibly include such a link, just encouraging people to reply. That's all.
So
I think they also wanted to just maybe encourage the teenagers to try to be a part of the process and try to energize them a little bit as well. So that was the point. I don't know how many of them actually responded to the survey, but they thought that was a nice way to try to energize the younger population.
Dr. Ferrara, would that be something that Reinvention would be interested in doing?
Absolutely, Tom. I would encourage that. I know the students would be excited to do it. So I'd start it with my student senate, and they're very involved in the community, and I think they would offer some good input for you.
Thank you. So then,
juniors and seniors would be my question.
You tell me who you want it from. I would give it to the Senate. Yes, you get probably better responses from juniors and seniors.
Yeah.
I would let the advisor of the student senate send that out. The leadership of the Senate is juniors and seniors. So I think that would probably be a good place for it.
Dr. Ferraro, do you still have the research seminar?
Yes, we do. It's with Dr. Fight. Is that the one you're referencing? Yes. And she would be happy to work that through as well.
What was that, John? What is it? Research seminar?
They do an independent, it's an independent program, and they engage in research and a lot of community issues, which they try to address. So I'd be happy to bring it to the students and have them involved with that.
Okay.
Good. You might be able to get John Liberty to do something as well in his original civics research.
The trouble is going to be time constraints, but beyond that, it could be a lot of fun and we could be very productive.
And Joe Liberty is, I think he is guiding the Oakland students from Mamaroneck High School. We are working with them on other things, so it will be very easy to connect them to do this survey to help us.
Okay.
Trustee Lucas and I are meeting with one of those students tomorrow.
Yes, as I said before, we all participate. I'm sure that we all here have some kind of affiliation and are with some other committees, and so we can use that. It will be very helpful to use our contacts.
You're right. You're right. Use your email addresses and your social media. Jerry, would this be something that we could blast out through our social media too?
Yeah, we have 5,500 on our email list, and we have all the platforms that, especially Facebook, that Robert manages.
Right. If we could have Rob put a link on Facebook, so people could just open it up right there. When people fooling around on Facebook, they're more open to do something like that.
So I can try to have a draft to this committee by email as quickly as maybe Tuesday. I don't know if I can do it sooner than that. And then as long as, I get that information by the weekend, I can work with Robert on Monday and Tuesday to put this together. Tuesday's a pretty busy day for me, but I can have, staff compile it and put it together and then send the draft out before the public forum. Then we would have the public forum at 7 on Tuesday night. And then maybe, bang around the survey a little bit until I can get it. I can get it out. Maybe Friday is typically when we do our blast. We're doing one tomorrow because it's a short week, but next Friday on the 4th, we're doing a blast. And so I can include it in that and just push it out.
I have a question. I know the survey is anonymous, but how do we know that the respondents live in the village or the town, for example? I mean, well, so if we put it on social media, anybody could have access to, to the survey.
Right.
So
I think in Rye Brook, some of the respondents lived in the village and some did not. And I think the idea is that not everybody who has an interaction with the Village of Mamaroneck Police Department are residents. You do have non-residents as well. So I think that's also valuable to hear from anybody who wants to comment.
Well, yes, I do too. But do you think it might be worthwhile to have a place where people can put their name, but then also let people know that you don't have to put your name?
I don't think names.
No names.
Okay, all right.
Or we could just ask a yes, no, are you a resident of the village?
Yeah,
so that
I
way
think
it just gives us
resident,
some context.
But
Okay.
I don't understand why that matters at all. Do you know how many people I see pulled over as people come off 95 by my house?
Right, I think that was the point.
Asked and answered, Counselor. Asked and answered.
Yeah, no, I think that was the point, is that even
Okay.
non-residents have valuable information to offer,
Yes.
I think. But I do
No.
think it does provide context to the comment, right? That's all, to give
Yes,
us
It
further
might.
insight into who's answering. And it may not, but it doesn't hurt to ask the question.
Isn't there some sort of a saying, which is like the quality of a nation is how it treats its guests or something?
Yeah.
People
I don't think so.
traveling through.
No. How it treats the least among them.
That's a different thing. And we're also talking about that anyway. I just want to say that the material that the Almost Chief has submitted is so impressive and so emblematic of who we want to be, and and aspirational, and also being implemented. And I really hope that as much of this that is already existent, that's terrific, and as much that we can get to, all the better. And frankly, when I see that there are certain trainings that the chief might want to be implementing, but for budget restrictions, we may have to, talk about, well, what can we give up in order to, what might be a trade-off for, different kinds of training in exchange for other things, or, I can't speak to how the budget of the village is managed and how tight things have to be, but, there are certain kinds of, for example, crisis intervention training should not be, it should not be inhibited because of funds, except, obviously we can't afford to have everybody training all the time. But, these are really good plans, and obviously some of them are already in place and some of them are aspirational, and they're really impressive.
Well, here's a saying that I'm going to make up right now. You get the government that you're willing to pay for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you just
I-
get a
I
good
think-
government because you deserve
I-
it.
No,
I think you also-
my point is that we can do, whatever needs to be done with the support of the people of this community and their ability to say, hey, this is worthwhile. I don't mind paying more for this. I think that we have to get away from the zero-sum game. Like, if I'm doing this, then I have to cut that.
I think you provide a good segue, actually. I was actually, okay, so just for a little bit of context, if I may just get up on my little soapbox for just a second. I'm also senior counsel in-house at MasterCard currently. We are very involved with a project called Project Able, and I can definitely delve into more detail at some point down the road. I think it's way more comprehensive than we can have the time to get into tonight. But in a nutshell, the Able project was started, well, it grew out of the EPIC project, which the police may already be familiar with. I know the Westchester County Police Department currently use what's called the EPIC project, which talks about bystander training and whatnot. That being said, they've now developed more trainings from that EPIC training, and they are currently working with the county to see how they can now implement this new ABLE training, which provides, you can have it's not just the training, it's a chance to kind of change a culture, and it delivers to the officers the ability to carry out the policies and procedures that may already be in place, but may not have the tools and resources to do it. So, like there's for example, a duty to intervene without training isn't that helpful, right? You can have it on the books, but if people don't know how to carry it out, it can be kind of a problem. So this training focuses not only on the duty to intervene and duties and trainings for the officers, but it also focuses on the officer well-being aspect of the training as well. So like we spoke about earlier, with George Floyd, had an officer been enabled to speak up, maybe someone would have, advised him to remove his knee. On the flip side of it, they did this training. They actually trained the entire New Orleans Police Department. Recently, the New York Police Department has signed up for it, as has the Yonkers Police Department. So I can get into detail about communities within Westchester and where they stand at the moment with that. But I'll give you an example. For example, one of the things that came up in New Orleans, there was a very senior officer that frisked an individual. They didn't do it properly. The younger junior officers on the team didn't really feel empowered to speak up, and they didn't know how to speak up. Lo and behold, he didn't frisk him properly, not frisk him, but sorry, pat him down as part of arrest, and not a frisk. It's not a stop and frisk situation. He was being arrested as part of a domestic violence situation. They put him into the police car with a sole officer driving him to jail. And as a result of him not having been properly patted down, and also maybe the police officer's not feeling empowered to speak up, he was able to take himself out of the handcuffs, reach for a weapon that was not discovered on him, and shoot and kill the police officer in the vehicle, right? So this is the type of training I'm talking about. It has a dual purpose. It serves the community, and it also serves the police department. And I think looking at the trainings that we have in place and how it effectuates the rules that are on the books is a very, very important point to what Theodora said. But I think we should also look at what else is out there and what's being talked about to enable police officers. One of the things that came up on this call, for example, is that for some reason, I don't know how accurate this is, but this came through the Urban League and through a couple of other members that were on this Westchester County call that I was on today, saying that all police officers have to, take, for example, like arson investigation training. I don't know that every single police officer needs arson investigation training, right? You have the arson investigating police officer, you call them, they come and they help. Maybe we can redistribute or reallocate some of those resources, like you were saying, to make sure that trainings that such as possibly ABLE or mental health training or something like that take the place of some of the trainings that seem to be redundant for all the members. So obviously I can send out more information about this particular program, and I'm happy to talk to whoever about it, and we can get into more detail about it later. But it's a great program, and there's a lot of excitement within the state level, the county level, and then also within New York City about it. So
good. Can I ask, Mayor, can I ask the chief a question?
Sure.
Is it at the chief's discretion what the officers receive as far as training, or are there standards first and then discretion after that?
So it's standards first, New York State
Okay.
mandates, and then discretionary.
Okay.
So as it was explained to me right now, the county, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because this was just from today's call, is that the county is responsible for standardized set training across the board for new recruits. I'm not sure if that's correct, but that's what I was told. Then from there, there is or is not ongoing training, and that may be department specific.
So it's kind of yes to all the above. So the county runs the police academy. That's where a new recruit gets his or her original training. And then going forward, the department is responsible for the training, but the county does host a lot of training that we attend.
Great. Okay.
And is there a requirement of a certain amount of training subsequent to the academy?
Yeah, so there are mandates that we have to meet on an annual basis.
Like continuing law enforcement education type training.
Correct.
So,
And
Chief,
does
I'm
every
sorry, go ahead.
officer have to meet whatever that requirement is?
And some of this links back to the accreditation issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So training is a big part of accreditation.
Okay.
So when I asked whether there are trainings that every officer has to have completed every year, that's true?
Yes.
Regardless of whether you're accredited or not, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then is there a whole other layer of training that is required once one is accredited, or is not particularly related to training?
So it's more lesson plans and organization of the training program as it deals with accreditation.
And is there a plan to become accredited?
Yes,
And what's the plan?
to become accredited. So
I think it has to do with editing. Go ahead. Sorry.
We're actively working on it. We've held up this baton and put it down several times over the years. But prior to all of this, we did start actively trying to achieve this. We purchased new software to help us achieve it several months ago with the help of the manager and the board.
Mm-hmm.
As I understand it, part of the accreditation process is, like they said, reviewing the policies and procedures, bringing them up to compliance with whatever the accreditation standard is, and thus also requiring a certain amount of trainings based on your position within the police department, if that's accurate.
So we have software now where we can provide training, web-based, where the officer has to actually interact with the training and then sign off on it. The same thing with our policies. So as we distribute new policies, the officers have to read them. It monitors whether they're reading them or not, and then sign off that they've read them. So I guess that was a big part of. I wouldn't have known that except for my previous employment. But when we looked at this software, the chief said that would go a long way towards the accreditation process. So that's completed and that's active now. But there's probably a whole host of other things. Potentially mid-year next year, chief, more or less, to be able to submit everything.
So if COVID doesn't
linger,
our progress again, that's a good time frame, and that would be for us to apply for accreditation and actually have them come out to us and do an audit.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that we would achieve it at that time, but we would start the audit process by that time.
Okay.
Just so for folks on the committee know that this past year, not only were there officers who were out sick because of what's going on nationally, there were a lot of times where officers had to be quarantined because of exposure. Then the police department had to reassign people who were regularly assigned to details such as detectives or bike to do regular patrol because they were down so many members of the department. And then they had to go to A and B. Instead of working an 8-hour shift, everybody worked a 12-hour shift. This way, the shifts would never run into each other. So that they worked very hard to be in a position where we would never lose the whole command at one point. And that caused a lot of juggling. It caused a lot of, people working extra hours and people working out of their kind of their normal routine, right? People who were detectives would now work in different details that they hadn't worked in a long time. And it was all because of, what was going on. And I think that it's fair to say that might happen in the future.
Yeah.
And because police officers come in contact with people a lot of times who might be carrying the disease, and then they have to quarantine or they get sick themselves. So this is an offshoot of policing in 2020, and just so the members of the committee know that they've been kind of working, one hand tied behind their back this past year, and I think they've done an excellent job. And I think we just have to realize that there are some manpower constraints put upon our police department in the last year. Would that all be fair to say, chiefs?
Certainly.
Yes.
Yeah. Seems like a quarantine before somebody actually shows signs of illness is a great time to go online and start doing some of those trainings. I mean, they're making their full salary,
So
on it.
Mayor, I want to put up the, I just want to remind committee members that we set up a Doodle sign up platform to be able to figure out which are the meetings, the committee meetings that we should, what dates we should have in December and in January. But we only have, I don't know how long this discussion is going to take, but we have about a half hour, 45 minutes, and we do have the 50A repeal question still out there from last meeting.
Well, let's get to that first. Mr. Sposino?
Yes, Mayor.
This is Bob Sposino, the village attorney. Can you speak to the 50A issue?
Sure. Chapter 96 of the laws of 2020 repealed Section 50A of the Civil Rights Law, which had prohibited the disclosure of police personnel files. So police personnel files are now, with a couple of minor exceptions, treated in the same manner as any other personnel file for purposes of the Freedom of Information Law, and I guess anything else. But the issue typically comes up in terms of what has to be disclosed or what can be disclosed under the Freedom of Information Law.
So it's Bob, it's an ask, you have to ask for it. It's not something that could be or might be potentially on a search and you can just search names and look it up. That's not our obligation. Our obligation is to provide it when we're asked for it.
Correct, that's right. Under
So
FOIL.
Bob, is that founded and unfounded?
At this point, the Committee on Open Government has opined that an unfounded complaint, the disclosure of an unfounded complaint would be an unwarranted violation of personal privacy and therefore is not subject to FOIL. It's exempt from FOIL disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
That's an opinion from the Committee on Open Government from July of this year. It's subject to whatever the courts may ultimately decide on that issue because no court has addressed it yet.
But they're in the process of doing such, aren't they?
I don't know if there's anybody challenging it on a FOIL basis. I mean, there's been lots of litigation over the criminal disclosure part of this whole thing. What the DA has to disclose in a criminal case. I haven't seen, in fact, I've seen only one case involving FOIL. This was an injunction, an application for an injunction against disclosure, and it was denied. That was from, it wasn't on that issue, it was on a broader issue. And that was from earlier, I think in October. The new law on this is developing as we speak. But what the legislature actually did was, in this regard, was not all that complicated. It took away Civil Rights 50A, which, one of the exemptions to FOIL is where disclosure is prohibited by law. So until Chapter 96 was passed, Civil Rights Law 50A was a prohibition established by law, and therefore police personnel files were not subject to disclosure under FOIL. Legislature changed that, and by eliminating 50A, and through police personnel files, as I said, with a couple minor exceptions, into the pot for FOIL requests. That's really all it did.
Okay, and the best advice from Committee on Open Government right now is that unfounded ones do not have to be?
That's correct.
Subject
We
to
mean
some,
unfounded and also not yet adjudicated, correct?
Well, I think that's a more complicated question. And I have not seen any guidance on that from the Committee on Open Government yet. I mean, I could argue that if it hasn't been adjudicated, it's
unfounded.
arguably unfounded and therefore not subject to disclosure. Or I could argue that the records, whatever documents there are, constitute records that are disclosable. I think at this point, the better answer is that if it hasn't been adjudicated yet, it's not disclosable, but that could change.
this is why Bob's a good lawyer. Did you see that? He was willing to argue both sides of that.
And he just arbitrarily picked one.
So look, I don't, can you explain unfounded and founded, not in terms of what they mean, but who would determine the founded, something that is determined to be true or something determined to be correct? Is that the internal investigation, the county, the judge? How does that happen?
No, we're talking now about police disciplinary records. So it would be the employer's disciplinary records.
Okay.
And the employer is the police or the village?
Well, the employer is the village. In Westchester County, it's either the village or the board of trustees on behalf of the village, or the board of, or acting as board of police commissioners under the Westchester County Police Act.
Yeah, I don't get involved as the manager.
Hold on. I don't want to confuse anybody here. How it works is if there's a complaint, the complaint is investigated by the police department, the internal affairs officers in the police department. The police department then can give command discipline. That's kind of like an in-house discipline. And if it rises to a higher level where charges have to be brought in a hearing, has to be held, then the Board of Trustees gets involved. But we're not involved in the day-to-day, regular complaints. Chief, is that correct?
That's accurate.
Yeah, the first is a more of an administrative process.
I don't want the public to think that every time there's a complaint, it's going right to the Board of Trustees, because that's just not the case.
So Mayor, the Board of Trustees as police commissioners determine the higher level of discipline, or are you allowed to bring in a hearing officer?
Well, there's two ways. I mean, I was on the board when we did a lot of this, unfortunately. And there are two ways that charges can be brought. The Board of Trustees can bring charges against the police officer, or the police command can bring charges against that police officer. The Board of Trustees in Mamaroneck can delegate that to a hearing officer.
Okay.
Because we passed a law in 2009 that required a permissive referendum, a mandatory permissive referendum, to delegate that to a hearing officer. which I think was a wise choice for the community.
Yeah.
But the ultimate decision is the Board of Trustees after the hearing. So you were not delegating away the decision making. The hearing officer makes a recommendation. The Board of Trustees would review the evidence and the hearing officer's recommendation, and then come out with its decision on punishment. Because usually if you go into a hearing like that, it's because they're looking to remove somebody.
Mhm.
Chief, would that be accurate?
So it could be accurate, but there are other
Good enough.
times if you offer a police officer as discipline, a command discipline, and they don't accept it, then you go to that next step also.
Right.
I see.
What about promotions and retirements and, you know, bringing new people in? Is that within the police force or the Board of Trustees?
The Board of Trustees makes a decision on hiring of police officers and the promotion of police officers, promotion and rank. The police department can make detectives and stuff like that without the Board of Trustees. But if they're going from patrolman to sergeant, that's a Board of Trustees decision. Sergeant to lieutenant, Board of Trustees decision. And obviously lieutenant to chief. It's based upon, you have to pass the civil service test. And then, you look at the applicants, people who want the job, and you make the decision, and usually you consult with the commander of the police department and take their evaluations very seriously. Because, from my point of view, I realize that I'm very transient here, that I'll be gone in a while. And if I hire somebody or promote somebody, I won't have to live with that decision for 25 years. But the police department will. So on my own personal way, I take the recommendations of the hierarchy of the police department very seriously, because they have to live with that person. And I will get out of here before that person is out of here. So it's a strange thing. When I first became a trustee, and they told me, okay, it was like right after I became a trustee, we were hiring all sorts of policemen because of retirements and other situations. And it just seemed bizarre to me. There'd been nothing in my life that had prepared me to make that decision. And at the time, there was a Board of Trustees that did not, in my opinion, confer enough with those that were police professionals and made the decisions based upon other subjective criteria. And just to point out that in the past 10 years, some of which I served in the village and a lot of it I didn't, the whole composition of the police department has changed. There are many, many more Hispanic officers that have been hired in the last few years. So, Saab brought up the day labor thing, and it was right to bring it up. That was a pivotal moment in the community. But while there's work to be done, there has been a lot of change that has happened. And I think there's a person on every shift now, or at least they try to make a person on every shift who speaks Spanish, so that there's at least somebody that can translate and somebody that can make people feel more comfortable. Chief, if anything I said was wrong, feel free to correct me.
No, you hit the nail on the head. Everything was accurate.
And he's leaving, so he could care less if he has to correct me.
Everything was accurate.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Sure.
Are there any certain types of complaints that automatically go to an independent review that are taken out of the hands of, for example, the police chief or commander and I think I know the answer to this question, but is there anything that's specifically automatically taken out of their hands and put in the hands of an independent independent arbitrator of some sort or hearing officer? Or does that still have to go through the step-by-step process? Like, for example, in the military, anything that has to do with sexual assault everything else is determined by a commander whether or not to bring charges. If it has to do with sexual assault, it's immediately taken out of the role of the commander and we go through a hearing process. Is there anything like that?
So pretty much anything criminal, we would seek outside sources to assist us with.
Okay, and is that on you to seek the outside sources? Like, I'm just asking, I'm not saying this is something you would do, but say something criminal were to come up, would you have the ability to essentially not seek outside sources and just make your own determination within?
Well, there are certain incidents where we're mandated to notify the Attorney General's office.
Yep, exactly. That's what I'm getting at. Okay.
Right. Yeah, so we're under the same mandates that everybody else is.
Okay.
But Chief, if you had an officer, let's just say, and this is based upon nothing, if you had an officer that lived in the village and was accused of domestic violence, would you investigate that, or would you bring somebody in?
So we would probably do the investigation and with the assistance of the DA's office. That's probably how we would handle it.
So bringing the DA in right in the beginning?
Yeah.
And Ms. Ari Mari, is that usually the case of how it works?
Yes, actually, Mamaroneck was on the receiving end of a situation like that recently. And under New York State law now, it's recent in the last, I want to say the last year, maybe the last year and a half, that domestic violence incidents can be reported to any police department in the state. And that police department has the obligation, the duty to fill out a domestic incident report and send it to the appropriate jurisdiction. So let's say a crime happened in Mamaroneck Village and the victim fled the area and went up to Syracuse and went to that police department to report it. That police department would be required to take a domestic incident report. They find out where the incident happened in Mamaroneck Village and they reach out to Mamaroneck Village Police Department and they forward that domestic incident report to them. So if an incident like what you just raised happened in the village, they would be under the obligation to do the initial domestic incident report if the victim did report it to Village Mamaroneck Police Department. From there, likely the scenario which happened recently was they will reach out to me. Our office also has investigators, police officers that work for our office. And if the situation hits too close to home to have a police department investigate and arrest one of their own, then we will step in and do the investigation and be the arresting agency if needed.
Okay, thank you. That was interesting. Jerry?
That's it on, what do I have on the agenda? I'll share it. So subcommittees, we really don't want to go into subcommittees. That was on the agenda. 50A repeal, that was discussed. We did our open discussion mostly regarding the survey. I don't have much else on the agenda that I prepared. If anyone else has anything.
I'd like to stick with this idea of officer discipline. And I know that the chiefs are aware of the pressure and inclination towards civilian review and a sort of fundamental distrust of officers policing their own. And I know that obviously can be a problem, and particularly this governor's process does involve trying to open up police discipline so that there is at least more encouragement for fellow officers to intervene rather than stand mute or engage in a way that is either unlawful or unconstitutional when a particular officer is acting beyond the appropriate actions for the situation. And we've seen lots of instances where fellow officers do not intervene to disengage an officer who is acting beyond the scope of legal duty. I think that also translates in terms of officers policing themselves and the extent to which there are civilian complaint review boards that are open and available to the general public, so that a complaint doesn't just live within the hierarchy of the police, but also has a separate life outside of that for civilian review, is not something that we do here. So one question is, who is this hearing officer? Have they ever been appointed, activated, that Tom was mentioning? When a case that was within the confines of the police department then goes beyond that. And then also, what about the idea of a civilian review of police complaints?
Well, I did just say the hearings that I was talking about, just to give you a quick background, what happened was the board appointed a hearing officer, a retired judge. He heard the cases, but at the time we did not have the law that delegated the authority. So the officers who were convicted by that hearing officer sued in an Article 78, and they had their convictions overturned because the village had not delegated properly. That's why we passed that law. That has not happened since. There has not been an occasion to use that law, and I hope there isn't an occasion to use that law. I don't know if we rise to the threshold of civilian complaint review board. I understand what you're saying, but if you read some of the recent articles in the New York Times about it, and I think in the city, they receive compensation for doing it. It's a hard job to do, and you need people who are actually trained to do it and who understand police work and who understand the laws and as they apply to that. And if even in New York City, where you read about how it's been handled, they haven't really worked out that well, because ultimately the New York City Police Department does not have to follow the recommendations of the Civilian Complaint Review Board. So I don't know.
Well, so isn't that saying that if approximately 7% or less of all cases recommended for action by the Civilian Complaint Review Board in New York City are actually acted upon by the NYPD, less than 7% of the recommendations are followed, wouldn't that extend to our thinking, gee, maybe the NYPD isn't taking action where this Civilian Complaint Review Board thought they ought to take action against certain officers. And by extension, maybe we should take that pressure off of our police department and have civilians involved in the process.
Well, to me, what that would say is that process isn't working. If 7% of the recommendations are acted upon and 93% are ignored, why would we want to follow a process that's ignored 93% of the time?
I'm going to remain mute on that.
Think about that.
I already thought about it.
Okay, I'm shocked you're remaining mute. Okay. I mean, it's a big responsibility, and it's not, like getting appointed to the zoning or the planning board. You're talking about, recommending discipline that could ruin somebody's life, or
Tom, we put people in jail based on jurors, innocent, uneducated jurors, and we do the same when jurors have to hear police misconduct cases. So you don't need a particular training to know whether somebody is behaving right or wrong.
Okay, Leo, I think you do, and I think, you know, I understand your zeal for this, but I don't think you just pull 7 people off the street and say you're not a civilian complaint review board. I mean,
If I may, I don't, I
hold
don't
on,
think.
if you could show me,
Yeah, go ahead.
you know, a community of this size, a community, you know, in this particular circumstances that has it and how it's working, you know, I don't think we should be looking at New York City, what has 30,000 cops and 8 million people. It's not analogous.
I don't think necessarily 2 rights create a wrong, right? Like to your point that, you know, you pull a jury off the street and they may or may not have the educational background to hear something. I agree that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we do the same for the police. I know that, you know, coming from the JAG background that I come from, one of the reasons we do have we don't even call it a jury, we call it a panel of fellow military members, is because we have to be able to understand the circumstances under which this military person was operating, right? So it's not, you know, myself walking down the street can never imagine being put in the position that a police officer may be put in, where a gun is pulled on and they have a split second to make a life or death decision. And so I can't pretend to be able to judge them based on that, because I have no idea what it's like to be in that situation or what trainings they received or anything of that nature. That being said, I think it is part of a larger problem. I think that there should be, and I think this is beyond the village at this point, I think that there should be a way to have an independent review. I don't think it necessarily has to be civilians, or maybe it's not all civilians for that matter. And I think there should be independent police officers, right? So there's a review of an action that took place in Mamaroneck. Doesn't mean that you can't pull in independent police officers who have no idea what these police officers, who they are, how long they've been on the force, have no allegiance to them, that are pulled from, say, Buffalo, for example, right? So, I mean, that's obviously much larger than the village of Mamaroneck itself, but I think it is a delicate balance, and it's difficult to put yourself in the shoes of those officers as a civilian. You know, I think that's a problem that's much larger than we're able to tackle at the village level.
It's one of the things that we're obligated to tackle.
I agree we should address it, and we should make that point when we submit. But I think when we submit our report, we can certainly make recommendations for things that can happen that are broader than this village. Like the village would benefit from X, Y, and Z, right? And so I don't think it's necessarily just because we can't have the answers within the village ourselves doesn't mean we can't discuss it. I'm just saying that I think it's a larger issue than we can address or solve at a village level.
But we are here to solve or address issues regarding the local village police department. And one of the issues is, should there be an outside disciplinary institution?
Or I believe we're here to make recommendations to solve, but not necessarily solve.
So one of the things I just want to say.
We're here to make recommendations for issues that affect this town or community. And we haven't uncovered any of those yet. But that whole commission is meant to be done by a peer who understands their job and where they made infractions or did something wrong. I don't think any of us are in a position to do that, whether you're a lawyer or not. It should be come from a police board where they know what the policies, procedures have been in that situation, and they can discuss what was right and what was wrong. I am no means thinking I'm able to do that.
So you can't determine what the use of force is appropriate in a particular situation and whether that was exceeded, Scott?
I can in certain circumstances, but I'm not, it's meant to be by their peers when they've been in the same situations. That's what I think it should be. That'd be my recommendation.
Apparent, right? There's situations where it's much more apparent and it becomes a lot more obvious to the untrained eye, right? But then there's other situations where there are very minute differences that are very maybe technical, that I think that's what his point was, is that yes, we are not necessarily in a position to make those determinations, but of course there are situations where it's very obvious and it's more black and white.
And then if it's criminal, it goes to a court.
Right.
But you know, I'd like to see if there are any communities in New York State that are similarly situated, similarly sized, that are doing anything like this. I mean, I think maybe we're getting hung up on the CCRB, but anything that provides an outlet for people in the community to feel aggrieved, to come to and make their voices heard. I think, you know, the CCRB is, you know, that's It's really a creature of New York City. And, in my opinion, it hasn't worked well. But, I don't think we should be closed to any idea that might foster better communication and have people come to a safe spot where they can, have people that can advocate for them, or have people that can hear their complaints and then bring that complaint to the Board of Trustees or the police department. But I don't want to get caught up on doing something that, that really is, big city police department problems. We should look to see if we have those problems. But
Mr. Mayor, can we cut in for a second?
Of course you can.
So, just let you know, one of the things that was put to the committee was our internal, our public and internal complaint process, which does indicate that we will take complaints, including anonymous complaints. And in one of the documents I submitted in regards to civilian complaints, in 2019, we only had 2 complaints received, and they were both regarding unprofessional behavior, only one being founded. And this year to date, we've only received 2 complaints, also regarding unprofessional behavior, and those were both unfounded. And since Chief Leahy has been chief here, we haven't had any complaints for excessive use of force.
And who determined that those were unfounded?
That was done by whichever lieutenant or detective sergeant was assigned to that case or that investigation.
Now, I will tell you that most people I know in the village of Mamaroneck would not believe that, how do I put it? Would not believe. Most people I know would say that they have been treated rudely by a police officer at one time or another. Whether they would bother going to make a complaint about it, I don't know, but I've witnessed officers being so obnoxious. And
So we're going to disagree with you. I don't believe that most residents of the village of Mamaroneck would say that.
you are definitely entitled to disagree with me, Chief.
Thank you.
I think maybe that's one of the questions we can include on the survey that talks about the complaint process and do they feel comfortable making a complaint, and if they have. So maybe that's, one or two of the questions we can ask as well.
I mean, Chief, do you think I was treated properly this afternoon by the officer in my neighborhood?
So I wasn't there. You can certainly come in.
You're never going to be there. That's why you're not a good hearing officer, because
So
you're
not letting me finish. You can certainly make your complaint. We can investigate it.
I just made my complaint. You heard it. That should have filled you with alarm. No officer should never be speaking.
We'll follow up with you tomorrow about your complaint.
Can I ask Lauren? Lauren, are you saying that maybe the state or the county should put maybe a CCRB together to maybe I'm confused.
It's some kind of adjudication process.
Right.
I do. I not necessarily I don't know what the answers are, whether it's a combination of civilians and police or how that would work. I actually, when this all first happened, I had a really great conversation with Shelley Mayer actually about the processes and procedures that we use within the military. And obviously it's not perfect. We have our own problems. There's been issues that have been addressed over the years, particularly with sexual assault, because it was something we identified where things could be brushed under the rug. And as a result, that was removed to an independent body. That's one of my primary duties actually as a reserve officer, as I go down and I hear a lot of these administrative Article 32 hearings, which are almost like grand juries to decide whether or not charges should proceed to a courts martial, so to speak. So I think the process could be similar, especially considering the similarities between a military member and a police officer. And I do think that that's something that would have to be orchestrated at more of a state level, because if you really do want to have independent officers as a part of a process, you have to be able to reach out to the larger pool, which would be afforded by the state. And I would argue that that would be larger than the county.
Okay.
If I could just jump in for 1 second. You do have an ability as well to make a complaint against an officer through the Westchester District Attorney's Office. And we would then review the complaint to see if it rose to the level of criminal charges. If not, after the investigation, we would then send the complaint back to the police department, for them to handle appropriately in terms of any disciplinary action that they deem appropriate.
But the DA's office would just be reviewing for criminal.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yes, Chair.
So I served on a grand jury this year. And I was in there with 23 people of different backgrounds. And we had to hear cases. Now, none of us knew the law. We were charged on the law. We had to make a decision, and it went that way. So I'm not saying that a civilian complaint review board is something that we should look at, because we really don't know our statistics yet in Mamaroneck. I was going to ask the chief a question, but it seemed like they answered it about the complaints that they've had so far. I don't know how many police officers have been disciplined in the last 10 years or have been fired for cause in the last 10 years. But, I don't know. I just don't know that we can't make that decision as a community, is what I'm saying. I don't know that I have to walk into the officer's path to decide as a community that this is not what we want, is all I'm trying to say. I think,
agree 100% with you. I just think that it's important to also have the color, just given the experiences that police officers have. I think civilians add a very valuable perspective, but I think it's also important to have independent police officers as well.
Yeah.
Just to provide that color and to also understand. For example, you have a police officer that's part of a department that engages in some kind of training that maybe a different police department doesn't engage in, and they know what the value of that training would be, and they maybe identify the fact that lack of training maybe contributed to some situation, right, where a civilian may not be able to bring that knowledge base to the table.
And I'm sure that this would also be a subject for collective bargaining too.
Yes.
So there's also a political aspect to it as well, because you'd be getting the Board of Trustees to appoint a CCRB, which could potentially, if you have a pro-police Board of Trustees, they're going to pick who they want. If you have an anti-police or I don't want to use the word anti-police, but the other way, you could pick a group of people that you know. So if it's done at a county or a state level, you won't know. That doesn't play in that scenario.
I think independence is the key here, right? Independent process, independent people who are making these judgments and these decisions. Because to your point with a Board of Trustees, they may be worried about an upcoming election, which could be positive or negative, right? They may be trying to make the right decision so that the people vote the right way, or they may be feeling pressure from, I don't know, from their fellow party members or people who are big donators to their, local campaign or whatnot. So at a town or village level, it becomes more microscopic and then, aggrandized, I think.
But I mean, I'll take it to look at other communities and see if anybody's doing anything that's analogous to this. Because I think CCRB, just the term itself, is it has both positive and negative connotations that I don't know are going to apply to the village of Mamaroneck. But maybe listen, I'm a big proponent of stealing an idea that's working somewhere else.
You know what can really speed this up is if the chief can tell us, maybe look it up for the last 10 years, maybe how many complaints were how many people complained, how many were found to be good complaints, because if we're talking about literally 10 and 2 were founded and they weren't serious complaints, then we're probably wasting time right now. But keep that in the back of the head, that's something we should look at. But I mean, if the complaints are that minimal and their disciplinary is open, because now it's open, 50A is being repealed, and we can see if anybody was found guilty of anything, or at least found for having cause for them to get disciplined, But if the chief says we had 50 complaints in 10 years and we found nothing, well, then that's something different. But
I agree, but then what about the one time that it does come up that it's a problem, right? And then that could lead to other issues. So if you have the policies and procedures in place, it prevents the furtherance of some kind of problem, you know, down the road. And even if it's not hugely applicable within a smaller village, so to speak, I think there's some value to us pointing it out as a problem. And, you know, in aggregation, how many other towns, villages, cities, counties are identifying the same issue, right? So, you know, you're part of a collective voice in that way as well.
Well, do you know if any towns are doing, like, you know, throw mama from the train? So like if Mamaroneck has a case that maybe somebody in the town of Mamaroneck looks at it. We've had a situation here not a couple years ago that involved someone close to one of the officers, and they dumped it to the town. Is that something that other places are doing? Maybe, you know, like crisscross. So it's not our guy handling it because maybe he feels pressured, or maybe not. He may be a big boy or big lady and don't feel the pressure, but it's possible. Is that something that they do?
So I can ask, so the executive has asked, the county executive has asked Blanca Lopez to take the lead on sharing information within municipalities. I can ask her if she knows, or if they know, if there's other CCRB type in villages, and then I can ask Jarrett's question as well to see if close communities or communities that are adjacent to each other are handling, you know.
Would the chief know?
Issues. I don't know.
But there's another dimension to this problem, which is there may be populations, maybe specific populations or general populations that would be willing to complain about my behavior to them on the street, but would be frightened to bring complaints before the police department. If we're lucky, the survey will be well enough designed so as either to get at that and show that there exist people who might have but have chosen not to bring complaints, or that they don't exist. But it might be a broader sample than just the ones that result in formal procedures.
I mean, Chief, can we get that, you know, not identifying anybody, but the statistics, since it was brought up before, as a watershed going back to 2007?
So yeah, I could take a look at what we have and come up with some figures.
Accurate.
I'm sorry, accurate?
I didn't hear what anyone said.
Yeah, I'll take a look and see if I can come up with something. I mean, you have the numbers. We would like to see the figures.
Just said he'd give it to you. Yeah.
No, not in so many words, actually.
Okay.
And I actually have a real bone to pick, Tom, because I was suggesting we explore the idea of some sort of civilian oversight of internal police discipline, right? And you cited the New York Times article and the series of articles about the CCRB. I didn't cite it, you did. And what is wrong with the CCRB is not the CCRB. What's wrong with the CCRB is that the CCRB is forced to make its recommendations to the police department. And the police department is disregarding its recommendations. It's not the work of the CCRB, which is flawed. It's that their recommendations are not being taken by the police department, which it is supposed to supervise. That's what's wrong, is that it has no teeth. So to attack the idea of some sort of civilian oversight because the police department in New York City doesn't accept the recommendations of its civilian oversight, the problem is not with the oversight body. It's either with the way it's set up that it isn't actually able to enforce its recommendations. The problem is that the police don't take its recommendations, right? So I can't imagine that we couldn't set something up with all these creative ideas of maybe some sort of exchange, or, Westchester exchange, or local tri-municipal exchange, or simply, a panel of 2 or 3 people from the village who may or may not be politically inclined, but it's better than no panel at all. And, to just review some of these decisions. That doesn't seem bad.
To your point, that's part of the reason that some of the mandates came down within the military with regard to sexual assault, because recommendations were made, but they were made to the commander that was very close to the individual. And so they were dismissed more often than not. So that made it so that it got brought to 1 or 2 or even 3 levels higher, depending on what the complaint was. So, it is an issue. It is something that has happened across the board, not just with police review, but all over the place. That being said, to Mayor Murphy's point, I think the process that's in place for the New York City one definitely leaves some like a little bit to be desired, so to speak. But nothing's perfect.
And then
I think we need to get a baseline of where we are.
Right. I think that that's a good question, is where we are, whether we've acted upon complaints, what sort of actions have been taken. And as part of the survey, we're actually going to be finding out whether people are raising complaints when they have them, or raising their experiences with the police department when they have experiences with the police department. I think that's really important. What about off-duty police behavior? Do we have a position on that? Does the department have a position on that?
We don't have a policy regarding off-duty behavior, but all officers know that they're held to a higher standard and they should behave as such.
Were you looking for something in particular?
I just wondered whether there is some standard by which police officers are told, that they do have to behave by a different standard, or can they behave like everybody else?
Like when they're out of uniform, they are like a normal civilian is I think what you're asking, right? Versus, for example, a military member, even if you're not in uniform and you're on vacation, you're always under the code of military justice. So I think, is that kind of your question, that there's another, they would somehow fall into some kind of higher standard even when off duty, so to speak? Right. Or are you talking about investigation of some alleged crime that's committed by an off-duty officer?
I'm talking about normal human behavior. Are officers expected to behave, are they completely private citizens and at liberty to do what they like in their
are they more akin to a military member, or are they a civilian who has a job, who shows up to their job? And then
I don't know about that standard. I don't know if it's the same standard. I don't
but I don't mean the standard. I mean, as far as like, for example, when a military member takes off their uniform, they're still subject to a certain code, right? So versus a police officer, whether or not they're subject to that code. I'm just trying to clarify your question. If they're still subject to another code when they're on or off duty, is that what your question was?
Expectation, and I believe Lieutenant Deruza actually did answer that they know that they're held to a certain code of conduct, right?
Yes, and even while they're working, it doesn't matter if they're responding to a call for service, they're getting a cup of coffee, they're getting lunch. They always have to be aware that they're always being looked at, they're always being watched, and they need to, be aware of that and hold themselves accountable to that higher standard.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else anybody else want to add?
So, Mayor, I'll get working on the survey with the committee, and we'll have something turned around, hopefully by Tuesday. And it looks like the survey is going to be an initiative that this committee wants to embrace and move forward. So that's good.
And you're going to send us the 3 other or 4 other examples so we can take a look at them?
You have them already.
You sent them.
Oh, I haven't been able to get in my email while I'm talking to you on that.
Okay. You'll see, John, there's a lot of stuff for you to read already.
You got to multitask, John.
I'm glad it's a small party on Thursday.
Yeah, thank God. Well, does that conclude our business for tonight?
Can I ask a quick question? Is anybody interested for me to provide more detail on our next meeting about that ABLE training, which by the way is free.
Yeah.
It's completely free to the communities that are interested in it.
Yes.
So
Yes.
The police department would like to see it.
Yeah, Lauren, if you send it to me, then I'll distribute it.
okay, yeah, no, I just didn't know.
Let's route everything through Jerry.
Okay, good.
Yep, absolutely. I just wanted to make sure everybody was interested in receiving.
And so it's enable or able?
ABLE, all caps, ABLE. It's a continuation of the EPIC training. It's run through Georgetown Law Center and a partnership of multiple entities, government, corporate, whatever, and it's all funded through donations, independent donations.
So I type in ABLE and then Georgetown Law, it'll come up.
It should come up, yep.
Okay, good.
Active bystandership for law enforcement project.
Yep.
And one other quick question. Do you want me to send you the decision from the lawsuit here 13 years ago, or is that superfluous?
I would like to get Sal's Theo said that she could make a brief.
Yeah, so we don't have to read the whole thing.
I will send the extracts to Jerry, and John will send the actual decision to Jerry, and he will send them out together. Okay.
I don't want to read the 60s plus pages.
Well, it'll put you to sleep if you're having trouble.
I want to read it. I was like reliving a time in my life when I was young.
Not boring, actually.
What?
It's not boring. She's very colorful in her language.
Yes. I read it. I read it at that time, but I don't want to.
You don't want to reread it.
Let me. This is only because it came up. But Theo, if you're willing to do it, or if you want me to do it, we could take the decision, and instead of extracting a 1 page of something, you can underline the relevant points that people should look at so they can flip through it and read those passages. Other people may want to know more of the history. Either way is fine with me, or neither.
I think she's saying kind of an outline like we do in law school, right?
Right.
Can I
outline of the case.
Yeah.
Can I tell one story? Can I tell one story from that trial? Because it's one of my favorite stories and it's about me. I'm on the stand and the lawyer for the day laborer says to me, Mr. Murphy, it says here in the minutes of the meeting that you questioned the legality of closing Columbus Park. I said, yes. He said, to whom did you question the legality? And I pointed to the village attorney and I said, Mr. Plunkett, sitting right over there. And he said, well, what was his answer? And I said, nah, he didn't think it was going to be a problem. Judge McMahon starts laughing and she puts the papers in front of her face.
There were a lot of things there that were kind of funny.
Yes. There was
I loved it when all the John Does received their discovery subpoenas, or whatever they're called, to their home addresses.
Oh,
God.
Oh.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That was problematic.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving,
Everybody
everyone.
have a happy
Happy
Thanksgiving.
Bye.
This isn't an easy job. Thanks for doing it.
Everyone. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.